Hello everyone and welcome to Maple Leaf Reviews. I'm Jeffrey.
I'm David.
And today we're going to be doing a review of...
Lignum.
Lignum. Let's cut some wood.
Yeah, let's cut some wood. Let's do that.
So, why don't you tell us about the theme?
Sure. So, Lignum is in fact Latin for wood, and it is a logging game set in the 19th century, as we will discover the different equipment that's going to be available for us throughout the game. And we're going to be trying to run a logging empire, and we're going to be in charge of cutting the wood, and even choosing an area to go cut, in which there's going to be a simultaneous selection between the players in which we do that, and we'll talk about that later. And then after we cut the wood, we're going to transport that wood either by beast, by foot, by raft if it's not wintertime, or if in fact it is wintertime, by sled. And so then we're going to transport that down to our very own mill. So each person will have their own logging mill. And that's where we're going to have to make a decision whether we're going to want to process and cut the wood into more polished wood, or if we want to just take the raw wood and sell it. And so we're going to have to make some choices. Do we want to sell right away so we have some money for later, because money is really tight in this game? Or should we put off selling that for later to maybe fulfill more lucrative contracts along the way, or maybe even put some things aside to save up so we can stay warm in the winter time and feed our people? So all along the way, we're actually going to be going along a supply path, which is going to supply us with all of the goods that we need, which is going to be the worker placement component of the game. And I think you and I both agree that's the most exciting part of the game.
So going into the biggest draw for me is kind of two things. Number one, talking about the theme. I mean, it might sound dry.
Well, and in fact, you dry wood during the game, and that's actually a very good thing that you want to be doing.
So it may sound dry to some people, but for me, it's kind of has a little bit of a personal connection, because my hometown was all like everyone heated their homes throughout the winter by cutting their own wood, transporting their own wood, drying their own wood. So, I mean, I just step into this setting.
Well, this must be why I always lose to you, because like you've experienced this at a whole new level that's beyond the table.
And the game is kind of broken into three phases, which we'll go into, but the supply path phase is really the most exciting part of this game for me.
I absolutely agree, because for this, the supply path is all about opportunity cost, because what's happening is as we choose to go down the supply path, you can never go backwards. So if you jump forward on the supply path and perhaps skip a few of the things that you can pick up, you're leaving it for somebody else. So you're choosing that this thing over here is more important to me, and what I'm leaving behind is going to be less important to you for you to mop up along the way. And so it provides a really great amount of tension and stress within the game. And so that's my favorite part.
What is your biggest con of the game?
My biggest con, and I can speak personally about this, is that it punishes, and I mean punishes, the player who cannot plan appropriately and efficiently within the game. And so one of the biggest components of this game is being a good planner. There's even a place where you can do planned work, where you can plan for things ahead of the season, and also for drying the wood that we're talking about. How do you dry wood and fulfill perhaps contracts and get just the right amount of money that you need to keep going and still having a large amount of money at the end, because that, after all, is going to be the winner, the person who gets the most money.
This is not a game where it's going to be $500, $1,000, $2,000. This is a game in tens of dollars.
Tens of dollars, exactly.
So, like, high scores of 100, if you lose by $5, well, that's such a small margin.
It's close. And so if you don't plan appropriately, there is a way that you can even, like, the game will help you out. There are loans that you can take out. But if you abuse those too badly, you're going to lose. So again, going back to what the biggest con for me is, if you're just having a bad day and you've forgotten, maybe some of the mechanics of the game, maybe it's a new refresher game, you might just get crushed right away, and it's going to be very unforgiving. And similarly then, if you're playing with new players, if you're a very experienced player playing with new players, you may have to dial it back a little bit.
So my biggest con is exactly that, is once you've played the game a lot, you're starting to see how to plan all these things. How am I going to prepare for this winter? How am I going to prepare for the next summer season or the last winter? I'm combining all these things together. New players is going to take a couple of games to start to get to that range, and it's just going to be hard to introduce new players to that. especially when you're going to be crushing them.
Well, and that's why I say maybe you want to dial it back
Yeah.
a little bit so to give them a positive first experience. And so, like, say for example, if you're watching this and your real job is you're like a logistics planner, you might find that this is like work.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's the only real con, but that again comes with inexperience of the game.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we can move forward to the presentation.
Yeah.
Because this game in its current state out in the market, you have the original version, which I have,
Yeah.
and we have the Capstone Games version, which you have. And full disclosure, we always play on the Capstone Games version because there's a variety of things that is different enough that we prefer that.
Yeah, it has 2 mini expansions added. Having never played the original, I can't speak to a lot of the differences, but I think overall the components are really good. I thought the rulebook was done well enough that I had no complaints after reading it.
Right.
How about you?
Well, and so again, I've only read the rules in the original version, and it comes with 3 different booklets. And I hate it when they do that. Like, I hate having, because what it does is before the game, you do have the ability to read through, and each booklet was worded actually pretty clearly.
Yeah.
I didn't have any issues with it. But then for in-game reference,
Yeah.
then it's horrible because then you don't know which one, like, oh yeah, this was a variant for advanced play,
Right.
so I got to go to this booklet instead. And I prefer to have everything just in one booklet, which is it's done in the Capstone version.
Yeah. The only, I think, component hiccup, and I'm just going to call it a hiccup because I've never had it negatively affect play, is the bearers are supposed to be green. The icon is green, but they're purple in the actual component. So other than that, I think really well done.
And I believe they're fixing that. I think I saw on social media that they've actually come out with, the green meeples.
Yeah.
So I think they're actually fixing that. But yeah, I've actually, I thought even for the other key differences between the original game and the Capstone game is like even your own your cut pile, your wood pile is in the original game, it's just a card. And whereas you actually have the cardboard piece. And then along the supply path, there are additional spots to stop at. The building stop is one, because that's the mini expansion that's on there, and as well as the joiner. That's another stop that's not on there. So in fact, one time you were coming over to my place to play, and I set up the original version of the game. We took one look at it. Yeah, I brought Capstone.
Let's just reset.
Let's just reset that. So, but all in all, the Capstone version is great quality, and there we have no issues whatsoever. The iconology is clear. The supply path is clear.
And the other good thing to mention too is I never find myself having to go back and constantly be referencing the rulebook.
Right.
Everything is there. The cost it costs $1 for each of these guys. It costs $1 to take a task. There's icons for everything. The order in which all the phases at the end, the cutting, the sawing,
And that's a great point to point out too, because it's all right along the top, and it makes really good sense when you are showing the game. Like, well, this is what we do.
Yeah.
And then going back, and I guess this would be a good segue into the thematic immersion of the game, because do you feel like you're cutting wood? And like when you're teaching the game with those examples at the top there, okay, here's what we do. We're going to go chop some wood, and then if the raft is coming down, it's going to be delivered to you, and then it's going to arrive to your mill, and it makes a very logical sequence. And I feel like I'm in the setting.
Yeah, I definitely, like I mentioned, I mean, this is how I grew up,
Yeah.
cutting wood.
Yeah.
I feel when I sit down and playing this game, I definitely feel like I am transported to this era, to this setting of where I'm trying to run a business, make the most money, and I'm doing that by cutting wood.
Right. So on the flip side, though, so like I'm with you, I'm right there. Do you feel that the mechanics are actually well integrated with the theme?
No, and this is kind of a perfect example of why I split up immersion and integration.
Right.
I feel immersed. I don't really feel like the mechanisms integrate all that well. There's a couple things like the supply path.
Right.
I can never go backwards. Why?
Well, see, and I was kind of debating a little bit about this. So when I said, well, maybe because the supply path to me is really, we're going into town and we're picking up some supplies for our next phase of what we need at our lumber mill. And so like walking through the forest and the supply path and picking stuff up, like, Red Riding Hood, I'm with you. But the way I view it is if you skip over a phase, basically what you're doing is, say, for example, you go to fodder because you're going to be transporting with an ox and a cart and you need the food. That's time that you've taken away from, say, dealing with the guy who creates rafts.
Right.
And so that allows me to go engage with him, and now he's fulfilling my contract to give me some rafts. Like that's how I kind of see it thematically, but I'm with you. Like during that phase, I I'm actually transported out of, actually feeling like I'm running a logging business, and I'm more focused on the opponent, in fact, what they're trying to do. And so there is a bit of a disconnect there with, like, I don't feel like I'm doing what I would be doing if I was actually a logging company.
Yeah, and I don't feel that negatively impacts the game.
No.
I'd much rather have mechanics that make sense for gameplay rather than just having mechanisms in there just because that's thematic. I mean, there are a few that are very thematic. Like you said, when wood goes down the river with the rafts, it takes a little bit longer for to get down there. And if you put that on in fall, guess what? When that river freezes, it stays there.
Yeah. And instead, you're using a sled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's thematic elements to it, but I'm glad they didn't sacrifice mechanisms for thematic integration.
Totally. And even with those mechanisms, again, with that supply path, I feel the tension and the competitive tension of competing against another company for the resources that I need in a resource-restricted environment to actually accomplish what I want to accomplish. So I'm still getting that feeling of running a business in a competitive environment, regardless of the fact that the actual minor mechanics of what's going on isn't directly tied to the theme.
So let's go into the mechanisms then.
Right.
Let's talk about. I mentioned there's 3 distinct phases in this game. The first one is where you select what area you're going to cut your wood.
So good.
This is probably the smallest phase of the game, but it's such a tough decision because this is going to set the tone for the rest of that supply path.
For everything. For everything. And it's one of those, it was one of these things that I was reading about my first read through of the rules. I'm like, I'm going to house rule this, or they had a variant for this of a different thing that you could do. I'm like, there's no way this is going to work for 2 players, because what happens is there's 6 cutting areas, and we have to secretly choose one of them, and each cutting area will have a predefined number of different types of wood and food available.
Yeah.
So then we need to kind of make it a judgment call. What's best for me? What's best for you?
Where's he going to go? Where am I going to go?
And I know that you know that that's the obvious choice. So you know that I know that that's the obvious choice. So
maybe I go somewhere else, but maybe we both are thinking the same thing. So then we're going to the same place.
So what do I know? I know nothing. And so then we've had some games, 2-player games, where we have chosen the same spot
every time.
And it blew my mind, because even some of those times that we chose that spot, it wasn't the best spot, because we finally we're like, okay, I'm not going to go where he's going to go, and I know he's going to go there. And added on to this is hardwood is so hard to come by in this game.
Yeah, and you need it for every single task card.
Yes, and so then when you see that out there, you want it so badly, so you know it's going to be really highly contested. And I think that's what makes this part of the game work so well at all player levels, because at first blush you wouldn't think so, but then there's certain bits that you need that are so critical, and maybe you picked up another task that has the softwood,
or maybe there's a huge food requirement this winter,
and you need that food. And so what's really I just love it. But what it does then is, if we both go to the same place, we're penalized in the fact that we got to split the food. If it can be split, and it has to be an equal split, any remainders left over there. And so there's times where, frankly speaking, that game where we both were always going to the same spot, I knew you're short on food. So then I'm like, well, I think he's going to go there. I'm going there just to prevent you from getting all that food. And I'm going to leave that hardwood for another time. And
like I mentioned, going into the next phase, that supply path, it sets the tone. Because if you're in the same cutting area, the person who finishes that supply path first, they get to cut first.
Yes.
And you either have to cut what's left or pay $1 and get out. And like I said, it's tight money. And it could be a couple dollars could be the difference.
Well, and all's not lost, though, because I know in our first plays, then that was a very major concern for me. So then we found that supply path became a race. And so we gave up lots because we were trying to get there first. But on the flip side, you say, well, I can actually mitigate that, because maybe now when we're choosing our area that we want to go cut, maybe I can kind of minimize your ability to get all the good stuff, still let you get there first. I'm willing to pay that $1 to go mop up something somewhere else because it's still looking pretty good. Plus, I'm start player next round.
Yeah.
So maybe that cost is...
There's so many things to take into consideration. And this goes into one I think is a pretty big thing. We mentioned planning is a big thing in this game. The other big thing is player interaction.
Yes.
Evaluating your opponent. What do they want? What do they need?
Yes.
How do I manipulate what they need to make sure I get what I need plus what I want?
Right. And then when you start going through your supply path, that factors right into, so where are you going to stop, Jeffrey?
Yeah.
Where are you going to go? Because then you sit there like, well, I really want, for example, I've been planning for a big move to use my sires. So I need to get to that sire spot first so I can get that extra guy. But how badly do you want that as well? So then I'm looking at what you're trying to do, and I may jump too far ahead and leave way too much behind.
Yeah, because if you jump so far ahead, then I'm like, well, there's no way I'm going to beat him now. I'll just pick up everything.
I'll just mop it up. Yeah, mop it up. But
so you want to jump far enough ahead that they think that it's still a race, but not so far ahead that they're just like, okay, I give up on the race. I'll collect.
I'll take all the free stuff and I'll do with that what I can.
Yeah.
And so, and even the way the supply path, you and I have talked about this while we're playing, where different things are at the supply path is just brilliant as far as I'm concerned, because they put them, there's a few things that are fixed, and then there's the random distribution of the other stuff. And so the random distribution changes how you don't have like, okay, I'm going down this part of supply path, I always do this, this, and this. So it takes that out of the game, which gives it a ton of variability, which we'll talk about. But then it also has these key worker placements, the woodcutter, the bearer, and the sire, and then the market.
Yeah.
Those are fixed areas, and you know sometimes, or you think you know, if someone's going to try to charge there. And so then you have these little mini pulses within your supply path.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. The other thing that I wanted to mention is it's a game about risk management too. How much risk am I willing to take take the things that I want, but I might be putting the things that I need in jeopardy.
Right.
So planning, player interaction, and I think there's also a little bit of risk management involved here, and that ties into the player interaction as well. And then those moments when the other person takes the thing that you need, and you didn't manage that risk all that well. You got a little bit too greedy, and you just look up from the table and you just say, "I hate you."
Yeah, and that's been said multiple times, multiple ways. But here we are, we're still buddies. I think. And the other thing I like when we talk about the supply path, though, there's also other interesting things. So you're picking up all the stuff you need to accomplish stuff, but there's also some neat set collection that goes along there as well, especially in particular when you're building these huts, because you got to pick up your building supplies to build these huts, which are incredibly powerful.
Yeah, you denied me one game getting them.
That was my strategy. Was I'm going to stop you from using those huts, because when Jeffrey builds his huts, your number one way you like to use them is as additional workers in the winter time, because you can use them as workers. And so I wanted to make winter very tough for you. So I said, no matter what, I'm going to stop you from getting those huts. But then you can adapt a little bit, because you need a very specific set of 3 things to build a hut. But then you can say, okay, I'm going to mop up other stuff maybe and use that to sell at the market, because then you can still sell that in a different way. But then again, going back to the thematic immersion, the fact that we're just picking up hut stuff along the way.
And we're just making huts, and then I guess people are coming to live there.
I suppose.
I suppose.
I suppose.
So the third phase of the game doesn't have the player interaction element, but I still really enjoy it because it's like a puzzle.
Right.
I've went around, I've gotten all these different things. I've been thinking about what does he want, what do I want, trying to evaluate. I picked up a couple things on the way, maybe left a couple things that I really wish I had.
Or maybe got screwed out of a few things. So now what are you going to do with what you got?
Yeah, so now I got all this stuff. How am I going to get the most money? How am I going to milk all this for the most money?
Right.
I love that puzzle.
Oh, it's fantastic. And while you're trying to, and it's not just the most money now, how do I take the money how do I siphon off the money right now so I'm good for next round?
Yeah.
How do I siphon off money or get things working so I can get end of game bonuses, or the task cards, accomplish those? How do I fulfill my heating needs and food needs? So maybe I got to put that off to the side. And how does this all integrate with my planning that I've done, that planned work? Are you now in a round that you're going to benefit from that planned work? And how does it all come together at those critical moments?
Yeah, all these simple steps. How am I going to now put all those gears together?
Yeah.
crank it. I spit out enough money for that I need for next turn. I spit out endgame points for my task cards. I got the stuff that I need to fulfill my planned work that I've done. How do I lock those gears in and then crank her?
You make it sound so easy, Jeffrey, and he makes it look so easy too, in fact. So yeah, the nice thing about this as well is when we talk about any kind of investment type of game, this game also allows you to take loans, which I really like and appreciate, because these loans are not detrimental and are not crushing to, like, when used effectively, they can be used as a tool to still win the game.
Yeah, like it's not like, oh, I've taken a loan, I've lost the game.
Yeah.
I got to pay back 3 for my first loan.
Right.
My second loan, I got to pay back a total of 8 for the 2 of them. So can I take that $4 loan and make more than $3 with it? Correct. If I can, I'm taking the loan.
Absolutely.
And using that effectively is another one of those things that make this feel like an investment, kind of reinvestment, money management game.
Right. And like going back to how we say that we feel immersed in a theme, again, this being more of a solitary puzzle on your own, that to me represents how a business is run. You go out, you're in a competitive market, you're getting all the goods that you need, you're acquiring the wood that you need, you're getting everything that you need. Sometimes you get what you want, sometimes you don't, but at the end of the day, it comes into your lumber mill, and you have to decide how you're going to turn that
Now it's an internal affair.
Yeah, now it's an internal affair. And so that is another part where I feel like totally immersed as a logging baron.
Yeah. So then we've already touched a little bit on the planning. There's a couple things that you got to plan for.
Right.
You got the winter feeding and heating.
Yeah.
That's crucial. It's not something that the game is about. Like I think in like Agricola, the game is about feeding your people. Mm-hmm. This game has the winter feeding and heating, but that's not what the game is about. That's something just you need to make sure you plan for.
Exactly. And if you don't, it's detrimental. It can be completely detrimental to your game. And we're going to talk about random things coming up with. And that's also one of these things that's randomly generated for the game. Like you have some cards that you put out, which I like because sometimes there's lots of food, sometimes there's less food. Yeah. And so then it kind of changes your approach sometimes.
Changes the formula.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Then you have those planned work cards.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, the biggest disparity between experienced players and new players.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because using those planned work cards to kind of combo things together, to time things at the right time, you can't plan something for right now. You're planning something for 1, 2, or 3 seasons.
Exactly.
From now. So having that foresight, experienced players are going to be using that a lot more than a new person. And
even the player with the most foresight, it's cheaper for them to take any planned work. Because sometimes when you see the planned work laid out there, you say, okay, this one looks really good. This one looks really good. But then if you're not the first person to plan it, then you're paying a penalty of $1 per individual who's got there before you.
And we said money is tight.
And money is tight. So now what you've done by stopping on the supply path for that planned work, not only now am I paying $1 or $2 to the people who are already there, who've jumped the queue and got there. Yeah. Now I've had to stop and they're running off and grabbing my sled that I need for upcoming or whatever it might be. And so planned work is so critical. And then I love the seasonality of the planned work as well, because some of the cards have different seasons to them.
Yeah, like not all of them are good for winter.
Correct. And so then I believe in my first or second game, I didn't anticipate that, so everything kind of fell out as well. So being able to step back and then seeing how you can plan, like you said, 1, 2, or 3 seasons in advance, and then trying to get them all sometimes to coalesce together.
Yeah, to plan something for 2 seasons or 3 seasons ahead now, next turn for 2 seasons ahead, next turn for 1 season ahead. They're all going to occur at one time, and then you just... Like I said, you crank those gears.
If you get it all to work that way, because that's another thing goes back to player interaction. Now I see you setting up this massive turn. What can I do to throw a wrench into that and kind of stop you from doing that? Yeah.
And the other thing that I wanted to mention too about the player interaction is it's not detrimental. I'm never taking something away from you. This is a very key point for this. This is why I like the player interaction. I'm not going over to your business and taking stuff out of your pocket. Mm-hmm. I'm destroying opportunities.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I just wanted to kind of highlight
I don't know if it feels that different when you're getting picked on like that, but yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're not taking anything away from me because, again, it's the key thing that describes this game to me is opportunity cost. Because by you taking something away, so to speak, or by taking something that's no longer available to me, I still get stuff. I can still do stuff, but it's not like a complete, like, well, it doesn't, some people watching this might say, well, if that's the case, well, then does any of your decisions really matter? Absolutely they do, but now I got to figure out, well, rejig things a little bit.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think is a major thing to plan for are those task cards. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, how am I going to get that hardwood?
Oh, yeah. And going back to experience, I keep forgetting my first or second game that you get a choice of your wood of your choice in wintertime.
Yeah.
So then I was really heavily competing for the cutting areas where the hardwood was, forgetting that, oh, wait a second, I can still get that hardwood via a different avenue.
Yeah. So let's go into the variability
Mm-hmm.
for the game. There's a couple random elements during setup. Number one is the buildings. If you have that mini expansion, they kind of change a little bit of the flavor.
Yep.
They're not like overpowered,
No.
but they kind of just accent a few things here and there. You have the planned work.
Yep.
There's a subset that you're going to deal out. So the different combinations that are going to be available that are going to be different from game to game.
And there's certainly some that become your favorites. Definitely, when you see it, like, right, I'm going straight for that.
Or some combos that go really well together. And then you have the winter cards.
Yeah.
How much am I going to need to feed and heat each winter? But the good thing about these is you see that as the game is set up.
Yeah.
None of this randomness is occurring through the game. It occurs before the game and kind of changes, like I said, that formula for how you're going to play. How are you going to value different things? And then each season, there's a little bit of variability as well. You have the task cards when they get refilled.
Yep.
Might be different. Oh, the supply path seating.
Yep.
The same stuff will always be there. But like you said, that order can really change.
Well, and there's some exceptions to that, though, because one thing I like about the supply path is, when we go back again talking about those craftsman's huts or the little huts, is when those materials are out of the game, they're out. They don't get replenished. So if you see someone, say, collecting a lot of the little spikes or like the wooden shingles or whatever, you know that they're starting to get, you know how many there are going to be. So when you see people collecting them early in the game, it becomes that much more valuable when you see it out there because you don't know if you're going to see it again.
Yeah.
Whereas there are some of those basics that you always see.
Yeah. And then where the wood and the food is going to get placed between seasons.
Yes.
But again, the good thing that I like, because I'm not a huge fan of random elements in a game, you see all this stuff before you start the round.
Right. And it's the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're going to, when we start talking about actually replayability, and maybe we can just jump to there right now, is it's all of this stuff that makes this game incredibly replayable to me. It's all this random setup, and because it changes your interaction with the game and with the players around it.
Yeah, because it's all about evaluation.
Yeah.
And small changes in the game state can have huge impacts on how things are valued throughout the game.
Yeah.
So you're going to be doing the same thing every game you play.
Yep.
You're going to be getting wood, you're going to be transporting wood, and you're going to be sawing that wood.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to change. You're not going to, like, the one time you tried, I'm going to go in, I'm not going to saw any wood.
Yeah.
That didn't work out.
No.
And you're even going to be doing very similar things from season to season.
Yeah.
But where I think the replayability comes in is trying to get into your opponent's head.
Yep.
How much do I value this? How much do you value this? And what effect is that going to have on the actions I take?
Yeah, and the timing of the valuation is going to change based on the task cards that are out. Again, based on, maybe a building that you have. You might be able to get a different synergy in one game that you had in another game, and your planned work. And so, it is all these different random elements that we've talked about that creates just a game with an incredibly high amount of replayability.
And especially as you play it more and more and more, the one thing that I found that adds to the replayability is how far ahead can I plan this game?
Yeah.
I'm going to start planning for the second winter in the first round of the game.
And that's why I lose. I can't see that far in advance. But then that also means that there really isn't a best strategy for this game, is there?
No, I think the weight of this game is more tactical than it is strategic.
Right.
I can't sit down before the game is even set up and come up with a plan.
Right.
I need to wait to see, as things develop, as things unfold, what is going to be my decisions this turn? What's going to be next turn? It's going to be all based as things come up. As you make a decision, that changes the decision I make.
Which, again, puts me into the theme of being a responsive business owner. I'm in this competitive environment. What's going on around me, and how am I going to respond to that? And again, for me, this game becomes extremely replayable when you're playing with experienced players. Do you think that you're going to have an amazing experience teaching this game to someone new?
It's going to take, I think, a couple plays before you get that same level of enjoyment.
Right.
Because they don't know how to evaluate things.
Mm-hmm.
So throws off your whole mental internal thinking.
Well, sometimes that's good because then that actually might make for a good experience for you. Like you were supposed to take that. You're supposed to take this. This is a better move for you. Yeah. I don't care. Now what am I going to do? I don't have fodder this season or whatever it might be, right?
But yeah, so I think you can really get, like you said, maybe a lot of enjoyment of the chaotic nature of a new player, but sitting across the table from someone who's just as experienced as you and trying to get in each other's heads.
Right.
And seeing how many layers deep can you think.
Because I remember that one 3-player game that you and I had, it came right down to the final scoring. Yeah. And it was intense. Like, it was really intense when it came down to it. And so, I guess maybe we could jump into then how many players do you enjoy playing this game with?
So, it plays 2 to 4.
Right.
I've played it with 2 and 3 players. Majority of it being a 2-player game.
Right.
BGG says it's best with 4.
Which neither you or I have actually played a 4-player game.
No, never played a 4-player game. I feel like we mentioned that whole area selection for cutting. I think that's so well done that I have just as enjoyable experience and just a kind of tight thought process and decisions to make in 2 and 3 players. In fact, the last time we played 3, I was kind of always off in my own cutting area. Yeah. And I was like, man, I felt more tension in a 2-player game.
I know. Well, because you were always involved with it, right? So when Jeffrey and I, again, like when we say there's so much tension with a 2-player game, I'm going to differ slightly from Jeffrey's opinion. So again, I played 2 and 3 players. And 2-player, I completely agree. I absolutely love. And parts that I didn't think were going to work well for 2 players work extremely well. Yeah. And really impressed. But the difference for me with a 2 and a 3-player game is the final, after you do the actual cutting selection, then you start going along the supply path. In a 2-player game, you can make these mop-up phases, really. And so that happens a lot. Somebody will jump ahead and then you say, okay, I'm just going to go through and mop up. Whereas in a 3-player game, that
much less likely.
It was much less likely to occur. And I found that the tension in the supply path was higher for me for a 3-player game. Only by a little bit. I'm not saying that the tension was bad for a 2-player game because you still had to decide, am I going to go all the way there and make sure I get that second Sawyer? Or maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to effectively use my hut and then let you get the Sawyer and I can still get stuff along the way. But for that, I prefer the 3-player. And 4-player, although I haven't played it, I think for me, just thinking about the difference between 2 and 3, I think that might start getting too chaotic for me.
There's too much you're thinking about.
Yeah, there's too many things. Whereas, so for 3, for me, felt really good. 2, for me, feels really good. Just giving the edge to 3 just because of that supply path.
So let's talk a little bit about the game pacing.
Okay.
So I mentioned that you're going to be doing the same thing, well, from game to game. And I even mentioned from season to season. But I think there is a little bit of progression in the gameplay.
Okay.
At the beginning, you start off with such a little amount of money.
$5, I think.
You got a little bit of startup capital.
Woo!
Grandma lent you a few dollars.
Boy, I wish Grandma had a more lucrative career.
So it's all about taking Grandma's money and investing it smartly.
Right.
And then making the most efficient investments that you can. But then once you start to get going and money starts flowing in, then it's about how do I really invest all this money? So I might be investing $3 to make 4, or I might be investing $5 to make 6, but that's $1 that I'm making.
And that might make the difference. And even within that, you have these different pulses. So again, like you're talking about the seasonality of the game, which again, I think is awesome. You got the different seasons, and then you're kind of preparing for winter all the time to make sure you have the food and the firewood. But then there's a pulse created by your own planning. And that's going to, again, like we said, is going to change based on the setup of the game and the randomness throughout the game and what your opponents are doing. And when you start making your own planning, like maybe plan again, like 3 seasons ahead or 1 season ahead, that's going to create a sense of urgency and tension in your own gameplay to make sure you don't screw that up. Yeah. And so then your opponents will actually see that. So they're going to try to throw a wrench in there without screwing up their own plan as well. And so that provides little pulses within the overarching theme or seasonality of the game, which I really appreciate because those pulses are different with each gameplay.
Well, and one thing that I always think when I'm playing the game is I'm not in the same cutting area as someone else this round. I'm going to pick up all that stuff that I can, because I can take my time. Yeah. I'm gonna stop here, I'm gonna stop here, I'm gonna stop here, because next time I might be in competition and I won't have the the chance to stop by and pick all these things up.
Right, and one thing we should actually mention that I think is really cool too about the game when you're choosing your cutting area is that also limits your ability to get woodcutters, because your cutting area, the amount of wood that's in the cutting area that you choose,
that's the maximum.
That's the maximum woodcutters you can get. And I guess we should have mentioned that earlier in the review, but I think that's such a cool component, because that will also impact, where you want to go. Because if you need to fulfill all of these orders, you need to be chopping wood. Like, that's after all what the game's all about, isn't it? And so then again, that, like you're saying, that provides another pulse for you, because now you've had this one round where you've been able to kind of wiggle in between the cracks of the other two players or 3 players, and then the next one you might be head to head, and it's a different pulse that's going, but you've set that up for you.
So how long do you think it takes somebody to kind of get the game, to figure out the mechanisms?
I'm going to argue it's going to take a half game. And so, because again, the game is played over 2 years, and each year consists of the 4 seasons of the year. Yeah. And once you see winter, I think you need to see how winter operates to go, oh. And I know that was like it for me, because winter, you're limited to you got one worker that can be used for cutting, transporting, sawing.
There's no supply path.
There's no supply path. So you need to prepare for winter. Winter is coming, I guess. So you need to prepare for winter. And you also need to realize that, you do get that free piece of wood winter. And so you can start factoring that into your planning. Then after that, it's more, okay, I've seen how the planning works. I see how this goes. So I'm going to say it's a half game for the mechanics to see it go through. And maybe, let's call it 1 to 2 games to actually start having a really good feeling on strategy.
Yeah, I think definitely half a game. Yeah. I think you have a firm grasp. You've seen 3 seasons that play very similar, and then you see winter. Yeah. You got it down. And then I think I'm still trying to figure out all the planning that can go in. Even after all these games, you kind of get a handle on it, like you said, after 2 plays. But I think after 10 plays now. For me.
You're at 10, and then I'm at I think 6 or 6 plays.
So even now, I still look at the when the game is over, I look back. I'm like, I could have done that better. I could have done that better. I could have planned for that better.
Sure, but I'm going to argue by after game 1 or game 2, you were capable of making these plans. But now even at game 10, there's still so much left for you to explore and plan for.
There's still little efficiencies that I can try and gain.
So what you're saying is this is not a game where when you're done, you're like, yep, that was perfect.
Never.
never that type of game.
Never.
And that's what keeps you coming back.
Exactly. Yeah. Can I have a perfect game?
Yeah.
Is it going to be possible? Am I going to have a game where I look back and say, yep, I did it all?
Well, but I think the player interaction will
always throw that wrench.
Yeah, always throw that wrench and stop you from ever having that feeling. Like, you might win, but like, I could have done this, or I could have done that, or how come I didn't respond this way?
Yeah. And then the very last thing to talk about, just kind of a comparison, is the advertised playtime versus our experience. Mm-hmm. So it advertises an hour and a half to 2 hours, and our average time across all my games was an hour and 35 minutes.
Perfect.
So I think it's right on point.
Perfect.
So let's go into our closing remarks.
Yeah, let's close it up. So Jeffrey, we've always played your copy of the game.
So I'm first?
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm going to give this game a 6 out of 6.
Woo! Okay.
Like I said, this game just speaks to me. Yeah. Thematically, the player interaction, it all speaks to me. So my closing remarks, my closing statements for this is, Lignum is a game where the best laid plans can be foiled by your opponents if you are not careful. One must be ever vigilant not to grow so focused on your own planning that you fail to take into account other players. Mm-hmm. It's a game about efficiency, investment, and risk management. Don't cut the wood because you can. Cut the wood that you need. Don't buy the workers because you can. Buy the workers that you need. Don't pick up all the equipment that you can. Make sure you get the ones that you need.
Like that saw you missed in the last game.
Yeah, in the live play.
Yeah, in the live play. Sorry, I hijacked that.
Lignum is a game of complexity that is built upon a multitude of simple actions. It's about who can see further. Are you trying to build a logging empire or just survive for the winter? Either way, you're going to have to plan.
Absolutely. And for that, it's a 6 out of 6.
Oh, yeah. I have nothing negative to say about this game.
Okay, well then, for me, I'm giving this game a strong 5 out of 6.
Very strong 5.
A very strong 5, but I don't give half stars, and it's actually, in fact, because of Jeffrey that I started giving any ratings whatsoever. So here's the reason why. Lignum is a great game of opportunity cost and player interaction. It rewards the studious planner who still manages to accomplish their goals and tasks despite the many opportunities to be distracted or for other players to negatively influence them. Each decision has me asking, how valuable is this to me? How valuable is it to everyone else? Mm-hmm. Like Jeffrey, for example, which forces me to try to prioritize and evaluate every single decision within the game. However, I can be easily distracted. Squirrel!
Well, you're in the forest after all.
Yeah, I'm in the forest after all. And sometimes what I imagine to be an efficient and effective strategy just turns out to be okay or often clunky due to extremely poor execution or adaptation to my initial strategy. This is certainly not a negative. In fact, it is my desire to outmaneuver my opponents and to effectively plan within the ever-changing Lignum landscape, both from round to round and from game to game, that gets me excited to play Lignum every time it's on the table. This is a game that rewards the meticulous planner who is comfortable navigating within a highly interactive environment. In fact, I'm not sure why I don't give this game a 6 out of 6. Yeah. There's nothing about this game that I don't like. But I find that I'm never suggesting it.
Right.
And it is for this small reason why I've rated Lignum a 5 out of 6. Despite this lengthy and detailed review, there still remains some small intangible thing that I cannot quite place my finger on that prevents me from giving this game a legendary status in my collection. It is a great game that I love to play every time you suggest it.
Right.
So those are my final thoughts.
All right. I think that was a pretty comprehensive review of Lignum.
I hope so.
Hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like button if you did. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And as always, we will see you guys next time.
Cheers.